you need to have presence. Like, if you're a salesperson, if you're not present in the moment, you can't possibly influence another person, because you just don't connect with them in the same way. You can't lead someone if you haven't connected. And to connect, you need to be present in every single moment. So I think that salespeople who have meetings and have their phone on their desk and it bleeps, it's just, you can't be in the moment if you've got distractions. You can't read the signals of someone that you're having a meeting with to see when you're losing them and when you're gaining their trust or getting more of their attention. There's no way you can do that if you're possibly in and out of the moment.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Scott Purves. Scott is a professionally trained actor and sales coach. So you should be able to guess what we're going to be talking about today. So Scott, welcome to the Sales Today podcast.
Thank you for having me, Fred. Yeah, great to be on.
So, it's an easy enough first question, second question, and third question probably. What do you take from the acting world, if you like, into the sales world and the stuff that you're coaching? What's the main thing or the first thing?
So the first thing that I would say is it's how do you communicate with other human beings, right? How do you meet them at their level? How do you understand a room of people perhaps that you don't already know? And to do that, there's a lot of mindset, there's a lot of introspection. So self-awareness, situational awareness, and how that all connects. So it's heavily embedded in EQ, but I think there's another dimension to it. And it's how do you become a chameleon so that you understand how to best connect with the person in front of you. So yeah, I'd say that's a kind of broad brush summary of how it connects.
Cool. So yeah, I know when we were chatting offline, you talked a hell of a lot about EQ, and I suppose this is going to thread all the way through what we're talking about here.
Yep.
But that the salesperson is a chameleon. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So what kind of things? Well, let's start off. What did you learn, and then let's take that into the world of sales. Yeah.
I think, do you know what? It sounds like a cliche, but when I was training to be an actor, I did learn a hell of a lot about myself. It's almost like therapy, right? When you go to acting school, because you do get ripped to shreds by your director, your teacher, whoever you're kind of working underneath. Yeah, it was hard. I mean, there was so many times I almost dropped out because your soul is ripped from your being when you have these group. You almost you'll do a run of the play or a scene, then you sit and you assess each person's role and what they did and what they didn't. And if you didn't perform, it was a bit like the X Factor when someone is just turned to shreds by Simon Cowell. It's hard going, but you've got to get through that. And, if you get through that, you probably get through anything, because it just makes you look at yourself and think, how could I have been so wrong in the choices I was making? Like, I just have no self-awareness. It's scary.
And is it being deliberately hard? People being tough on purpose to make it painful, or it just is because that's what the process is?
So I had one director who he ran the whole school. And he was such an astute observer of human behavior. So you can see why he ran his own drama school. So because he was so good and his eye was so sharp, he would destroy you like within the drop of a hat. And I don't think it was to be nasty or to be pointed or to make you feel like crap. I think it was just because that's what he saw and he just wanted you to get better. So he just didn't. He didn't dress it up, straight to the jugular every time. So yeah, quite hard when it's public and you've got 50 other actors in the room and you're all quite competitive when you all want big roles, we all want to be Macbeth and Hamlet, and then you're told, you can't even carry a, tray with a drink on it without looking like an idiot. What chance have you got?
That sounds like it might have been actual feedback.
Well, that's shouldn't have been Fred, won't it?
Sorry, I don't want to resurface those memories. So okay, so this self-awareness, this understanding of kind of what you're all about, and kind of observing and understanding human behavior. I mean, that sounds certainly as though that's stuff that we can use in the world of sales.
Do you know, what I found during my actor training was that it's almost like you have to relearn human behavior. So it's like, because you're going into a setting which is unrealistic, but it's made to be realistic. You've got to question every movement you make, every thought you have. It's like you've unlearned how to walk and you're relearning to walk. And it's very difficult because you've got to be in the moment. You've got to connect with people in real time. And if you come out the moment, you just lose the thread and you sound wooden and you look wooden because it's just not natural. And I think the connection to sales is a really clear one. As a sales trainer, you'll have seen this hundreds of times, that people, when they're selling, turn into someone else. They have this weird, almost like this weird mask that they wear, and it's just not natural. And they're very pushy. They're very sort of almost jarring how they're talking to potential clients, because they don't really understand how to be a normal communicator, because they think sales requires a different hat. And they just become this really awkward individual. And I've done it when I first started in sales. You think you need to be something else, and you do, but you have to be a chameleon in a subtle way and not a sort of a really bad actor, which I think is what a lot of people in sales do become, or at least start out that way.
Yeah, it's kind of almost this, I don't know, what would I call it? Almost like false professionnosYou sort of put this mask on and become this cardboard sort of cutout of that's kind of what I should be. So it sounds like what you're saying is that it's kind of, you need to be comfortable in yourself and what it is you're doing and be more natural. What about the element of being a chameleon where you actually do adapt? And so you're doing things that it's more comfortable for others.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I that's stuff I certainly talk about. I mean, what's acting taught you about that?
So I think there's a few steps to it. So you can't just go straight from A to Z, right? You can't just become this incredible chameleon who's so subtle and can read the room at the drop of a hat. It just doesn't work that way. I think the first step is that you have to understand yourself. You have to have such a acute awareness of yourself before you can then become that chameleon. So I think once you understand why you have certain emotions and what things trigger you and how to manage those, you can then start to become more of a smooth communicator, because you can understand how to manage your inner chimp. And it takes practice, right? You need to just be in as many interactions as possible so that you can get better at this stuff, because you can't practice without meeting real people. So the only way to get better is just by not just by doing it, but by constant introspection. So after every sales meeting, every interaction, you've got to think, what could I have done better? Where did I lose them? Why was that awkward? Why did they, look as though they wanted to leave after 10 minutes? What did I say? And you just fix it. So every single time you should be coming 0.1% better at the human communication side of things, so that by, 5-10 years into your career, you should be a very slick communicator. We all know that salespeople just have the same year time and time again, because they're not tuning in to their self-awareness, and they're not improving because they don't introspectively analyze their behavior.
Because, as you said, it's hard.
It's hard, really. And it's work, right? It requires effort, and people can't be bothered.
When you say the chimp, just talk to me a little bit more about that.
Oh, so the chimp. So, I love the Stephen Peters, right? Book, the chimp paradox. So I've read that a few times, and it's all connected. That's EQ, right? In a book. and it connects to sales, it connects to acting, because it is just a study of human behavior, why we do what we do, and how to get the best outcome in certain situations, which is a win-win for you and your prospect.
Yeah, it is an absolutely awesome book. And if someone listening to
Amazing.
this hasn't read it, I'd thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's such a great model. I mean, the brain is a complex thing. To
Yeah.
simplify it so you can get your head around it, so to speak, to
Yeah.
then be able to do things in a way which is more conducive to success. And
Yeah.
it's not surprising that that is so popular with professional sportsmen,
Yeah.
women,
Yeah.
because it's just so easy to understand.
It
It's
is.
a bit tricky to do, but the model works. The model's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. He was with Ronnie O'Sullivan for a while, wasn't
Yeah.
he? Ronnie used to lose his temper a lot, and he's now the best snooker player ever, due to a lot to his
Yeah.
training.
Yeah, for football teams, rugby teams, quite a lot of people have used
Yeah.
it. They're the ones which he mentions, you know?
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we got clear. I mean, the other thing with a comedian, it's do you, what are your thoughts on sort of recognizing personality styles and then sort of deliberately adapting what you say and do to sort
Yeah.
of
So,
match the other person? Are you
yeah.
into that stuff?
Yeah, I am. So disc profiling. So I run training in that. I kind of run disc in two ways, because I know a lot of trainers will just look at bio profiles, in terms of the different personality types. But I would break down who are you as a salesperson? What's your type? And who are the other people in your team if you're doing group meetings? And how does that align with your bio committee to think, how can we best integrate the two? So yeah, so I think I think what's interesting about that as well is that no one is just 100% D. No one's just, we're all blends of each. So to understand what someone is, it just takes very quick analytical mind in the moment to think, well, it's pretty obvious someone's a strong D, right? But then there's a few gray areas across the rest. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when no surprise that you have that focus on start with yourself, start with your team.
Yeah.
And that's as you just talked about that from the acting days.
Yeah.
It always makes me smile when you do train people in that. And some people start to then behave a little bit oddly. And it's like, no, just because you're D, it doesn't give you permission to
Yeah.
become more D and just pass off, well, I'm D, aren't I? Of course I'm
It's like a
course,
life.
of course I'm blunt.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's now you understand you can adapt better.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not a green light to just go full throttle, right?
Always makes and you pretty much always get it. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we could talk just about being the chameleon for ages.
Yeah.
What other elements would you say, or give me another element that you're transporting from that kind of acting world into the sales world?
So I would also say that particularly for younger salespeople, and I was in my early 20s when I used to get extremely nervous when meeting with prospects who were 20 years my senior. They were CEOs, C-level directors. So I think a big part of this, and it links into the emotional state and your own emotions and how to manage them. Because if you say have a meeting with the CEO and you're very intimidated because you sit down and they're, strong D, as most CEOs are, you've got to get on top of your emotional state. You have to understand how to manage that situation very quickly. Otherwise, you'll just get tossed about like a rag doll, and then you'll leave the meeting with a 50% discount, and then they'll come back to you type thing. So yeah, I think it's so important. And I think just some tips on that as well. I think in the face of this intimidating person that you're trying to convince to buy your products, you need to slow down. You need to breathe. You need to give yourself a chance and opportunity to respond in the best possible way, and not just roll over and have this reflexed reaction to what they're saying to you, which again, you're losing your emotional state. You're not managing it effectively. So I think just slow down, speak slower, and you will just give yourself a lot more wiggle room.
Is that almost acting 101? Is that like first week of acting school, which is we're just going to teach how to breathe? And I was like, we know how to breathe.
Yeah,
I've been alive
exactly.
for 20 years. I obviously breathe.
That's what everyone's looking for. Like, you've got this.
I don't breathe. Breathe it out.
But it's so we used to spend like for 2 years I was training and we did breath work every single pretty much every week, 2 years. The big mistake that people make is that they breathe into their chest, which is shallow breathing, right? But you need to breathe into your diaphragm, which is in obviously the bottom of your stomach. And to do that, you need to breathe through your nose very slowly, and you need to exhale at a similar sort of speed. And you start to get into a rhythm of that. So that becomes more autopilot, because most people breathe into their chest and they cut off their power from their diaphragm. And that's where your real power, your presence comes from. That's how you connect with another human being, by having that center of power, which is very, which is running your entire, being in that moment. So I think that links nicely to another point. It's how you need to have presence. If you're a salesperson, if you're not present in the moment, you can't possibly influence another person, because you just don't connect with them in the same way. You can't lead someone if you haven't connected. And to connect, you need to be present in every single moment. So I think that salespeople who have meetings and have their phone on their desk and it bleeps, it's just, you can't be in the moment if you've got distractions. You can't read the signals of someone that you're having a meeting with to see when you're losing them and when you're gaining their trust or getting more of their attention. There's no way you can do that if you're constantly in and out of the moment. It's just suicide.
Okay, so if I've understood this correctly, for presence, we talk a lot about having presences.
Yes,
you have to be present.
Yeah,
that's where the connection is. It's
correct.
not to do with like wearing the right shirt, the right cufflinks, and sort of saying the right things and having the right LinkedIn profile banner and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's just the bells and whistles, right? You need to you need to be you need to give yourself 100% to that person in that moment. Obviously not staring them out and making eye contact like a lunatic, but just being so aware of that. Yeah, just giving all of your attention to that person so that they feel listened to, they feel understood, which, that's all people need, right? If you feel listened to and understood, you will connect with the person in front of you.
Do you think that it's in some ways harder for people to do that now?
Yeah.
Do you mean with distractions? Well, distractions and stuff where we're working virtually.
Yeah.
Okay, hands up. I got distracted. Well, when you're talking, I thought I turned off all notifications. For some reason, I hadn't.
Yeah.
Because I'm like a Pavlov's dog. I looked at it. Yeah. And you start talking about presence, which is quite an irony. Either that or that's why you took it that route. I don't know. But there is so much stuff going on now, which is competing for our attention. That's what wants us, and we're trying to give it to somebody else and not be selfish, but putting it where we want it to.
Yeah, it is. It's almost like a lost art, isn't it? To be present in the moment, to even be present with yourself, like without possibly reaching for your phone. I think I'd read somewhere that the attention span of an average human being has decreased from 12 seconds to 8 seconds in the past 20 years. Yeah. I mean, that's just going to get worse, right?
We'll be with the goldfish soon.
I think we already are. I think we're on that point.
It's true. Somebody once said to me that, it's not surprising that we get distracted by this stuff, because previously, in the 60s, the smartest people on the planet were trying to put a man on the moon. Yeah. Now the smartest people on the planet are trying to design stuff to take our attention to where they want it.
Spies, right? That's all they want.
Yeah. I love that. So for presence, be present. You can do all these kind of weird things and whatever, and power stances and the rest of it, but actually just concentrate on somebody, what they're saying, how they're saying it, what it means to them. It's a great gift to give someone as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think without that, if you're not locked in to a conversation 100%, you'll miss all sorts of cues and signs. Like you will not be able to read between the lines of what they're actually saying, or reading a slight inflection in their voice or a slight intonation that maybe it tells you something else. And a lot of the time, the cues that you get from another person they're not always aware of those cues on a conscious level, but they're communicating something subliminally or subconsciously in that moment because of their emotional state, which is almost, beyond consciousness to some extent. So, yeah, so I think it would do both yourself and your prospects a disservice if you're not giving them, 100% of your presence and focus.
Sure. And I mean, apart from, so working virtually, let's just think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
We are doing lots more of that. I mean, apart from the fact you are literally working in a medium where there are going to be things which are going to distract you, it's the same machine that you're using. Do you think it hampers that a lot? Does it make it easier? Does it make it better? What's your opinion on working?
I think if we're going to talk in general terms, I think that it hampers salespeople. I think some salespeople will tune into it and be really, really good. They might prefer it because they don't have to necessarily be present in their body language as much. So it takes a bit of pressure off. So it's just obviously shoulders, but I think you are losing a lot of nuance and a lot of subtlety that you would otherwise pick up on. So, so I think it's hard, isn't it? Because when you're speaking to someone on Zoom, their eyes, you're not quite making eye contact because they're looking at the camera from an angle and so are you. And it's like, okay, I can't look into your eyes properly, so I can't quite connect in the same way.
Yeah. And they're looking away and your brain unconsciously is going, they're not interested, but actually they could be looking at you.
Yeah.
Because of the way they've got the screen set up. You don't
Exactly.
know. You could give yourself that logic argument, but
it's a funny one, isn't it? But I think we've definitely lost some of it. And again, with like, we all know now that cold calling is probably one of its lowest points for a long time. You're losing fundamental communication skills if you just hit press and sequence and expect, you're just losing that. If you're an SDR, you're not having that 2-year training of speaking to senior level directors and trying to get their attention. You're just losing that. You haven't got the muscle. You're not building that muscle.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, part of me thinks with the virtual that, I mean, you get a close up of somebody's face. I mean, technically our faces are closer than it would be if we're in a meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I hope. Get an old meeting, wouldn't it? But then there's other things we'll get lost a little bit. But I mean, interesting what you say about the calls down at an all time low because machines are going to do it all for us.
Yeah, scary, isn't it? AI is, and that's one thing that AI can't do right at this moment, but who knows in 2, 3, 4, 10 years, where it's going to be.
Aren't emotions biological algorithms or something?
I haven't heard that. I do like that though.
I think it was
a good one.
Yeah, I didn't make it up.
That's pretty cool.
Is it Raj? No, the guy who wrote *Sapiens*, I think, came up with that.
Oh, I know who.
Not Fred Copestake. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's him. Not me. Oh, cool. Right. So, we talked about the chameleon. We've talked about being present. What else? Any other kind of major things? I like things in threes.
Yeah. We all
the brain likes things in threes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Let me think of a third element to this. So, I used to do a lot of stuff in terms of, when I was at acting school and other type of self-development, visualization techniques, the power of expectation as well. I think it's a really good thing to do within your mindset. So professional sports stars, athletes use visualization techniques. We all know that. So why shouldn't professional business people, professional salespeople, know your outcome, work backwards, visualize what you see as a perfect outcome, and your behavior should work towards that. And I'm sure most people listening to this know that the same pathways are fired in your brain when you visualize something as they are if you actually do it in person. So it is, for me, that's just fascinating, really. If Usain Bolt is visualizing himself winning 100 meters in the record time that he does it, his brain doesn't know the difference. between the two.
I read somewhere that when, particularly sports people, because that's where they put a lot of study into this, do that, the muscles actually fire in the sequence of them doing whatever they're doing. So if they're doing a high jump or something like that, and they're visualizing it, and they've got the electrodes all over, it's like and it's like firing in the way that they were doing that. So just let's rewind a little bit, because you've thrown some sort of technical language in there, which I think is just worth us explaining a little bit more about. They talked about outcomes. Yeah, now salespeople should be very comfortable with outcomes. We should be talking about these all the time. But in this particular instance, objectives and outcomes. Do you see those as different things?
It's a good question. I think, I kind of think there is a bit of a blurry line between those two. And so, I mean, there's another part to this that I would probably say it's a bit of a caveat to this. I would say that if you are visualizing a certain outcome, you don't want to be attached to the outcome, because then you're not giving that conversation a room to breathe, because you've got your almost self-centered objectives, right? I want to bag a contract for, 50 grand. And if it's not correct, you'll still push for the close. So I think we've got to be quite careful. So I think if you're going for an outcome, it should be not necessarily a, say, 50 grand deal for you. It should be a win-win. The outcome should be a win-win, whether or not they go ahead or not. And at least if they don't go ahead, you've qualified out so that you know. So the outcome should just be a resolution or a conclusion to your meetings that you've had. Whether it goes ahead or not is almost the byproduct of that, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, the way I've used this in the past is kind of like, the objective. When we talk about objectives, we talk SMART. Have to. The law. You can't use objective and not use SMART in the same sentence. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timescale, bang. It's quite concrete, quite cold. And we definitely need those, for an account plan, a year's plan, a meeting, call, everything. Should have an objective because it gives us a direction.
Yes.
Where I go into outcomes being slightly different is okay, you've got that objective, but now build a mental representation of what it's like when you achieve that. What do you feel? What do you see? What do you hear? What's, those sensations? Because that's the bit that can then make it real for the brain. And the brain says, oh, I like that. That is something that I've got more power to strive toward. And as you say, while you're doing that, it's then experiencing what it's like to achieve, and it wants more. And then the visualization is that, okay, so what do I have to do to get there? How do I run the race? How do I go on the beer bang? How do I do the thing? How do I, whatever. So, and it's incredibly powerful, which is why people are seeking that the extra 1%, marginal gains, are doing this stuff.
I like that. Just the outcome is the emotional injection into the cold, always logical, smart objectives, right?
I'm gonna talk about a model now, but then not remember what the model actually stands for. But it's definitely one worth looking up, which is Petal P.
P.
P-E-T-T-L-E-P, which is, again, it's an acronym for how people who are doing this stuff at a very, very high level will break down the way they visualize. And so, it's basically, what place are they going to be in, I think, is one of them. What time of day is it? Kind of what the temperature, what are they wearing? What are they, I think that it kind of
what can they see? What can they smell?
It's really bringing it as alive as you possibly can. So again, the brain is going, this is so absolutely real that we've done it before. And we were successful. So cool. Which I guess is, so from acting world, is what you're doing is you're kind of reading the script, so then you kind of bring it alive in your head. You're visualizing how you're going to do that. Then you practice.
That's it.
Loads.
And
practice and practice. And then get dressed up to practice. And then practice with people watching you.
Hopefully it's less practice than more.
Well, do they have isn't there a rehearsal with some audience in? Do you tend to have performance, Fred?
In other actors who you're again you're looking around and it's very competitive. You've gone up to nail this scene. There was one, actually, I wrote a post about this recently. So there was a scene that I performed in Macbeth, and it was a it was a long monologue of regrets. It was in, I think, Act 2, Scene 4. And I could not get the emotional depth in this monologue. I just couldn't get it. And I kept doing it. And it was just like, it was becoming embarrassing. It was like the words were there and, it was all kind of making sense. I didn't get the next layer down. So my director, I did overhear them talking at break time, and they didn't know I was around the corner. And he said, "Yeah, we're gonna have to replace Scott. It's just not working. There's no emotion." I spent weeks and months of my life putting my heart and soul into this, and it crumbled me inside. So I went home and I had a bit of a meltdown. I thought, this is not working. And so the next day I came in and the strangest thing happened. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I almost felt like I bottomed out and I couldn't have gone any lower.
Yeah.
And I brought that emotion into that scene, and I somehow transcended that emotion into Macbeth in that very moment of his particular journey, and it works. And I somehow, you take an emotion and you transpose it, and it's the same emotion, but in a different context. And I completely nailed it. The director was just like gassed. He was like, where did that come from? Well, I've been working on it. Then I just seemed to come together today.
I heard
don't
you.
know.
I heard
Yeah.
what you were saying about. Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. But practice. I mean, I think that's another thing that we are saying, that, are we guilty of salespeople not practicing enough?
Yeah. Salespeople still cringe with role play. Like, role play is the fundamental basis of practice. I mean, if you're cringing with that, you've really got to consider, like, why you're even doing sales. If you can't just practice for 20 minutes a day to role play, then you're practicing the prospects. What's the point of that?
Yeah, and do stuff differently. Doesn't matter if you drop the ball. I mean, yeah, sports analogy. So try a different move, drop the ball. Yeah, no matter. It was a safe ground, or whoa, that worked really well. Right, we can put that into play.
Yeah.
You would just rock up and try a sort of spangly new move, unless you'd given it a go.
Yeah.
So many. I'm sure we could and probably will in the future come pull some more learning out of the acting world into what you're now coaching and using this very much full time in the world of sales. How can people get in touch with you?
Very active on LinkedIn. Pretty much post every day, so you'll catch me on there. And so I would say LinkedIn is the key place for me, really. I think we all hang out on there, don't we?
We do, and you do post every day, and it is good stuff. It's worth connecting. I'll say people definitely connect with Scott, and look at what he's saying and engage with it. He's one of the guys that does respond if you comment, and you can have a decent conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been good chat. Enjoyed it,
and we'll speak soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.